think you also had mentioned about that data is kind of the backbone of AI. But with so much dependency on the underlying data, how is data biases handled? And what about data privacy requirements?
So data privacy, I mean, I think, clearly this is something to be worked through with these platforms. One thing that I should probably emphasize, as I usually do, is that if you're using these tools, you should always use the paid versions of them, and make sure you put the settings, as I said before, to privacy levels. Paid versions, because they're a lot better, but also they won't just basically suck your data in and use it for their own training purposes. In terms of data biases, I mean, there's a longer conversation around that. And as I said at some stage of the talk, one of the core issues here is these tools are all built essentially on the Anglo data set, if you like. And so you end up in a place where, so you see on the left-hand side, that's, in terms of the data set, that's how the world, AI sees the world. So the data is effectively heavily concentrated on information out of North America and essentially Western Europe. And so effectively it's now producing first drafts of the basis of that. So that's one of the really big challenges. There are other challenges around, for example, often historic issues around, for example, tracking skin tones. So tools were very good at sort of spotting who white men were, moderately okay at white women, terrible at spotting black women. And that has a really big issue in terms of both the sort of contents produced, but more importantly, when you start applying this to healthcare tools, for example, there's some real risk involved in this. So thinking about data is really critical. Understanding the potential biases is key, and building a team that can work through how to handle bias and be aware of bias, which typically means they're not all white men, is a good way to basically get to a place where you can deliver better outcomes. Yeah, there's a lot more to be said about data and bias. So the one final thing I'd say as well is historically, prior to ChatGPT at least, the punchline to pretty much every client conversation I had was not that doing AI gives you competitive advantage. It was being in a position to do AI gave you competitive advantage, because having the right data sets to use for AI was very hard to do. It's hard to underestimate how much money you can spend improving your data set, making sure your data plumbing works well. And that's often the really hard bit of the challenge. And part of that obviously is going through that and making sure you don't have AI bias.